Welcome, ladies and gents. Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter for boxing related tweets, or you can subscribe to the channel, hit that notifications button and get a new notification whenever a new video is uploaded. Let's talk boxing. First and foremost, I'm going to talk about Hrgovic and Radonjic. I'm also going to go on to talk about Sam Eggington and Bilal Jkitou. My goodness me, what a fight that was. What a war. So we want to talk a little bit about that too. But first and foremost, I want to start off with Hrgovic and Radonjic. Radonjic, of course, looked like a terrific fighter on paper. 22 fights and 22 knockouts. You know, that looks good by any standard. But then when you start to delve into it, you realise that actually BoxRec currently have him ranked at 233rd in the world. Right, so you're talking about a guy who is nowhere near the top echelons of the sport, and he hadn't been in there with anybody at all, really, of note. Nonetheless, it was a Balkan beef, a bit of a Croat Montenegrin derby, I guess you could say. So, you know, there would have been some real interest there from a lot of the fans that were ringside, especially when a guy does have that level of, you know, a knockout ratio. You would assume he has that a respectable level of power at the very least, because these are still big men, they're still heavyweights. If he's knocking out 22 straight, you know, there must be something there, right? But there's no point in having missiles if they're unguided, if you don't have the launch codes for them. And that's essentially what he has. He may be a heavy-handed fighter. I say may because I didn't see any evidence of it against Hrgovic. But he didn't know how to set up shots. You know, he was clearly out of his depth. He was clearly a novice who's learning the trade. But he had a lot of heart. And he was swinging for those fences. And Hatman did a terrific video. I found myself nodding along all the way through. He was talking about some of the fantastic stuff that Hrgovic does. And there is a lot there of fantastic things that he does. But I also want to talk about some of the things that I feel could potentially be banana skins for him. All right, so we'll talk about that. First and foremost, in other words, what I want to discuss is the idea that he is this boogeyman in the heavyweight division that everybody needs to run from, is it justified? Or is there a little bit of hype sprinkled on top of that dish? Well, let's talk about it. Hatman, like I said, did a terrific video. And he was talking in this breakdown of essentially how Hrgovic goes about trying to put that left hand in your face. And he comes off on the side, and he's always just on the outside of that right shoulder of yours, okay? He's just out of range, and he's threatening with that lead hand, okay? He'll move it around, pop it the jab from there. He's got it in your face, he's blinding you, and he's always looking to edge out. If he does come outside, he'll throw the right hand down the pipe, straight. It's very straight when he does throw it in that manner. Or he'll just jab over your hand. He'll jab you. He's looking to land that jab. It's not just a rangefinder. He does look to jab. Now, in the past, I've spoken about when I did the breakdown of Lomachenko against Rigondeaux, I spoke about how Rigo uses his left hand in a very similar way. He will also try and blind you, have it out there. But what Rigo will do is while he's got his left hand there, when you engage the left hand, he'll either slip out, so you'll touch the left hand to come down or bypass it, and now he's slipped out of his center line and he'll shoot a right hand down the pipe, okay? A power hand down the pipe, right? Alternatively, as you engage it, he just ducks. And as he ducks, you miss. And then he'll take a walk. In other words, his focus is on how not to get hit. And he uses that hand, that lead hand, almost like a shield or a rangefinder or a trap, a bait, right? Hrgovic thinks in the same manner in terms of the lead hand, how he uses it. There's a lot of movement for it. He doesn't want you reading it, but in a much more offensive-minded way. He does look to stab you in the face with it quite hard and then build off of that and set up that big right hand down the pipe. He's also very, very good, as Hatman rightly pointed out, at taking a half step back or even leaning back. Again, this is something I've spoken about in the past, whereby he's brilliant at avoiding that first phase of attack. But what he'll do is he'll take a step back and then throw that shot down the pipe too. So he'll make you fall short, then land a shot. When you do take that step back and you lean back on that back foot, sometimes you're set up for that to bypass the first phase of attack. But how do you bypass the second phase? Are you ready to then slip out again a second time? These are question marks that need to be asked. And I'm not so sure, because there was more than one occasion where Radonjic was able to land that over-the-top shot. Now, it had no effect, really, on Hrgovic, but there were a few occasions, more than two, three occasions where he landed this shot. And it's telegraphed without a setup. So if he's able to close that range quickly enough, not all the time, the majority of the time he was punished for it, but if on occasion he's able to do that, what's a guy who's taller than you, or as tall as you, who knows how to set up these shots going to do? Is it just a case of Hrgovic was thinking, you know what, this guy's a nothing, a nobody, there's no point in wasting my time here. And so you get hit with shots that you're not supposed to get hit with. Maybe it's a case of, listen, Chris, don't be too harsh. You can't swim without getting wet, right? But here's the thing. If you're in the ocean with these big waves, of course you expect to get wet. But if you set yourself up a little inflatable paddling pool for your toddler and you go and stand inside, you can just tell the missus, 1 second, I'm going to go play with the baby. I'm just going to stand in knee height. When you get out that pool, you better only have had water up to your knee. If you're coming out and it's dripping off your face, everyone's going to be looking like, what happened to you? So was there enough of a frenetic danger in terms of the waves that were being offered by Radonjic to justify Hrgovic being hit on a few occasions? I don't know. I personally think he should have made even easier work of this guy. And although we knocked him down on multiple occasions, at no point did he have him looking like he was completely out. Radonjic had to get pulled out. And even then, just before that, he's still running his mouth to the camera. He was, he was giving it. He was getting caught with shots and he was running his mouth saying, there's nothing wrong with me. And this is a guy that doesn't know how to roll with shots. This is a guy that doesn't have a high level defense. Is this famed power, this supposed monstrous heavy-handedness, going to scare the elite level heavyweights who do know how to roll with shots and evade power shots? Now, the other thing as well that concerned me a little bit about Hrgovic, I want you to go and watch the last 30 seconds of the round. It's on the Zone, right? So it's not really a big deal for you. Go onto the Zone, check out the last 30 seconds of the round. That's all I want you to watch. Prior to that, he'd been working quite hard. He'd been letting go of these shots. To me, he looked ragged. He looked a little bit tired, Hrgovic. He's throwing these wide sort of hooks that he's got no right to be throwing. They're almost like arm punches, and it looks like his arms are heavy, right? Now, I'm not making out like he's breathing and he's about to get stopped or anything like that. He just looked not 100% sharp. And again, I'm wondering if somebody sets the tempo. Joe Joyce got a split decision win against him in the World Boxing Super Series many years ago now, back in 2013. So 8 years, you can't really read too much into it. Not too much. But although fighters improve, often the foundation, the basis can still be seen in the amateurs. And stylistically, although they've both honed what they do, you can still see them, their identity, their blueprint was still present in the amateurs. And so you can see certain weaknesses that may still continue to this day, even if they've honed their skills. Well, when I'm looking at Hrgovic, I'm wondering, that was a 6-round fight. He's lost on a split decision. If that was over 12 rounds and someone's setting a tempo, is he going to be able to unload in the way he was doing consistently over 12 rounds, especially when he's being hit back? Now, something else that Hatman did raise is that Hrgovic hasn't been matched up as strongly as somebody like Joe Joyce. And if you look at Hrgovic's record, you will see that the biggest name on his record is Molina. Now, Molina, of course, by the time he fought him, was nowhere near the sort of hungry Eric Molina. He was 27-5 at the time that they fought. And he was just not there to try and win a fight like he had been in the past. So you have to ask yourself, what is going on here with Hrgovic? BoxRec, who do base, I don't always agree with their rankings, of course, but they at least base it on the concept of a points scoring system. You get points based on who you beat according to their ranking. So while I don't always agree with the rankings, and as a result, you might get a discrepancy in what is fair in terms of the points you've scored and so on and so forth, there's a foundation to it. It's not just like these governing bodies that just decide that, I don't know, some random dude is, Mark Damori is a top 10 heavyweight and you're just sitting there thinking, what are you on about? It's not like that, BoxRec. So when you see that and you see that Hrgovic is ranked 27th in the world, you have to start asking yourself, why? Guys like Sergei Kuzmin are ranked 22nd. Dualpa is ranked 23rd. Zhang is ranked 25th. Why? Are these guys more talented than him? Are they better than him? Ajit Kabayel at 12th, right? Now, in reality, if you're talking about ability, I don't agree with these rankings. Ajit Kabayel ain't the 12th best heavyweight in the world, right? But if we're basing it on a points-based system, you have to ask yourself, why is Hrgovic not being tested? Why is he not in the ring with these bigger guys? What is going on? Why has Joe Joyce been progressed more quickly? Now, I know a lot of people are going to say to me, but Chris, Eddie Hearn's been talking about how, in an IBF eliminator, they couldn't get Hrgovic to get in the ring with anybody. Nobody wanted him. As Hatman rightly points out, it's a risk versus reward factor here at play. Offer the right amount of money and anyone's going to want to get in the ring. Don't, and again, a point that he made, Mike Tyson was the one that there were people that would get in the ring with him. And that was Mike Tyson when people used to talk about him like he was invincible. Not Hrgovic. Hrgovic ain't as big as a boogeyman as Mike Tyson. So if you get people in the ring with Tyson, you could get people in the ring with Hrgovic. It's a risk versus reward factor. Okay. And he's going to have to start taking a few more risks, at least in terms of what they're offering opponents if they genuinely believe in this guy. Because yeah, you might have to invest a little bit now to get a bigger name in there. You might even make a loss on it. But if you believe in this guy, then who cares? You're going to make that back, right? When he goes and beats Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk, because that's what you believe, right? I'm not so sure they do believe that right now. I still think he does have a bit of development to do. But he needs to do that developing. He needs to start being in there with some bigger and tougher opponents. Let me know what you think, though. Am I over-analysing? Am I just trying to nitpick too much? Maybe you say, Chris, man, he was in there against a guy he knew he could blow away. If he was blowing a little bit or he was a little bit tired, it's probably because he didn't have the hardest training camp. He'd come in much better shape against a bigger and better opponent. And when he did get hit, it's just because he probably got a little bit lazy sitting in the pocket. I barely noticed he got hit because it didn't have an effect. So Chris, you're overanalyzing. Hrgovic is still the man, and the reason they're afraid of him and the reason no one wants to fight him is because they all know that and they're afraid of him. Maybe that's your position. Now let's talk about the other fight, Sam Eggington against Bilel Jkitou, really quickly. What a war that was. My goodness me. You know, if you look at them aesthetically, they couldn't be any more different in terms of personality and the persona that they both portray. You know, Bilel Jkitou is a guy who came to the stadium, the arena, with white framed sunshades at night, black lenses, a multicolored shirt. He's got bleached blonde fade haircut. He's got a designer beard. One of his best friends is Karim Benzema, the French international footballer and Real Madrid superstar. And a lot of footballers in France, people like Jkitou WAR, retired now, but a lot of guys like that do seem to have a lot of sort of connections and links and close relationships with people in the hip-hop world in France, in the music industry, right? And apparently this guy, being friends with Benzema, is one of those guys. He has those relationships. So you can just imagine with the way he carries himself, the persona, you know, the character, the fact that he is a very, very fun boxer to watch based on what we saw last night, first time I'd ever seen him. And you marry that with the sort of celebrity friends he's got and the crowd he mingles with. You can imagine a way, you can envisage a way whereby if he starts to step up, he could end up being some sort of a little mini star in France, right? He could capture the imagination. He'll probably appear in a few music videos if he hasn't already with a lot of these rappers and stuff like that. So there's a future there potentially for him. But he had to beat Sam Eggington to take that step up. And this was for the WBC silver middleweight title. Now, we all know the silver belt, it's not really a belt, right? But what it does do is it provides you with a ranking. So it gives you the opportunity to then step up and become more of a household name. Well, stylistically, like I said, aesthetically, they couldn't be more different. Sam Eggington, his nickname is the Savage, and all you have to do is look at him and to know why. He's got this unkempt beard, tattoos all over his body. He looks like a graffitied wall in the south side of Chicago. This guy looks like an extra in a Mexican gangster movie where he's just come off the barrios of some street gang. They just look so different. They carry themselves differently, but the styles mesh to create a war. And Barry Jones, who's a former world champion, of course, who has been there, done it, seen it all, right? Been in there with a Hall of Famer and all sorts. He was talking about how privileged he felt to have been able to commentate on a fight like that. You know, these two warriors left it all on the line, and you've got to give a tremendous amount of credit to both guys. In terms of where they go from here, Sam Eggington won the fight by split decision. I felt that that was the right decision. I had Sam Eggington winning the fight by a couple of rounds. Now, the judges had Eggington winning the fight. A couple of them had him winning the fight by 4 or 5 rounds, and the other judge had Jkitou winning the fight by 4 or 5 rounds. I can't remember exactly what the scorecards were now, but it wasn't controversial because unlike last night's card with Valdez and Conceição, which I thought was ludicrous, this one was one of those whereby it was an absolute humdinger where every round was close, and some of them were quite samey, quite similar. So what could happen is if you sit there and you think, you know what, I prefer what Sam's doing here, and say rounds 3, 4, 5, 6, for argument's sake, are of the same pattern, you can end up scoring 4 rounds to Sam Eggington. Whereas if the other guy thinks that, actually, I think Jkitou, I prefer what he's doing here, even if you both split the round, say, I give 51% to this guy and 49% to the other, he scored 4 straight rounds to Jkitou. So all of a sudden, the cards can look really skewed. But I don't have a problem with that when it comes to these sorts of fights. Boxing has to be subjective, and this was a war of a fight. So hats off to both men. They were absolutely incredible. In terms of where they go from here, Sam Eggington, man, how much damage has this guy accrued in the course of his life? Has this dude ever been in a fight that's been easy? Like, seriously, he's involved in wars. You got to watch this fight. It's very, very entertaining. Fight of the year, for sure, so far, or certainly a candidate for it. He's ranked 16th in the world by BoxRec. And when you start to look at some of the names above him, you have to start asking yourself about where he goes from here. And if you're going to look at the WBC rankings, because that's obviously the route he wants to go down, the elite level guys in this division are going to be too much for him. They just are. He's too easy to hit. And although his defense has improved in recent years, you know, in the past, you know, he would use his nose to try and parry shots, right? But although it's improved, he's still there to be hit. You know, you're not fighting a shadow. You're not fighting a ghost. He's there. So although he'll set a frenetic tempo and he'll hit you back, and being the smaller man, although because he's not a natural middleweight, you know, he's 5'11", he's tall, he's got advantages that he could use that he doesn't always choose to use. But despite that, his natural build isn't that of a middleweight, you'd have to say. He's a naturally smaller guy. So if he's exchanging heavy leather against some of these big middleweights and they're finding a home, I think it's going to be limited as to how far he can go. I know a lot of people are talking about he's the most improved fighter out there. He's going to go places. I think there's a ceiling there. I'm not going to lie to you. But listen, he's an honest fighter, a fighter that you will never, ever get bored of watching. You can't beat him for value for money, you know. We were talking recently about Sky Sports and some of the fighters they need to fight to sign up, and I gave you the example of David Lemieux. Sam Eggington should have been a guy they were trying to get on board, you know, just because of sheer entertainment. But in terms of Jkitou, listen, what I'll say is with both of these guys, they were too content with operating at mid-range though. There wasn't enough upper body movement. Eggington at times did show some and he did pivot out at points, but there wasn't much in terms of, I mean, not every fighter can get off on the back foot, right? But at least changing the angles on the inside, getting yourself off of that center line. At times, Jkitou was dipping and throwing a hook, which was great because it was taking him off the center line. But he wasn't doing it often enough. And there were times when the uppercut was there as an opening and he wasn't really sort of launching it. And early in the fight, he had more variation than Eggington. I think he's the heavier-handed guy. I think he's got more variation. I think Eggington had more stamina. And, you know, they were both incessant. It was a terrific fight. But for me, Jkitou was, I don't want to use the word, you know, basic, but both of these guys have a ceiling, in my opinion. I guess you could argue that Jkitou, you know, he was only 15 and 0 prior to this. He still has a lot to learn, you could argue. There's, you know, he could improve. Whereas with Sam Eggington, weirdly, I think that he's actually capable of doing a few of these things. And he just chooses not to, which, you know, is a bit baffling, but that might suggest he's incapable of maintaining that focus. Let me know what you think, guys, of this fight. Where do you think either one goes from here? Where is their ceiling? How, you know, can you think of a better fight this year, though? Let me also know what you think about Hrgovic. Do you disagree with me? Do you think he is the boogeyman? He's the monster that's about to take over? Or do you like me, feel that, yes, that's possible. He's got the tools to go and become the top man, but there's still one or two things he needs to work on. And to work on those things, he needs to start upping the opposition. Thanks for watching, everyone. Chat to you soon. Take care. God bless.